Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our meeting of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 4:04 p.m. Okay. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. So now let's do our roll call. Liz, can you see the interpreters?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Michelle, are you here? I'm not hearing Michelle. Ms.
Chair, I
Mahoney.
believe Michelle was in the meeting, but seems to have dropped off. So maybe we can check in again at the end.
Okay, I'll just continue on. Nicole, are you here?
I'm here.
Excellent. Jackie, are you here?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
Excellent. Jordan,
I am here, yes.
excellent. Councillor Diego Gammon,
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here.
excellent. Kristen, are you here? Okay. We do have regrets from Michelle and from Councillor Russell.
Chair and Kristen is not yet here.
No, not yet. Okay. So, should we wait or just continue and circle back later?
Thank you, Chair. We do have quorum, so we are good to go ahead with the members that are here.
Excellent. So now I'll look for the approval of the minutes. Are there any changes the committee wants to make to these minutes?
I would make a motion that we approve the minutes as distributed, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Jackie. Calling for the question.
Question?
All in favor of these approval of the minutes, raise your hand or say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion to approve the minutes has been granted. Carried. Approval of the order of business. We've all seen the order of business. Do we have any additions or deletions?
Thank you, Chair. And from the clerk's office, there has been no request for additions or deletions for today's meeting.
All right. Well, I would move the following motion, or I would ask for a move of the following motion, that the agenda be approved as presented.
I'll move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jackie. Can I have a seconder, please?
It's Jordan, I'll second.
Thank you, Jordan. Calling for the question.
Question?
All in favor, you say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Business arising out of the minutes. We have none. Is that still correct, Annie?
Thank you, Chair. That is correct.
Okay. Do we have any declarations of a conflict of interest? Okay. We do not have any considerations of deferred business. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. That is correct.
Okay. Correspondence. We have correspondence. Do we?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There has been one piece of correspondence received for item 9.1.1 today, and that was just received and then distributed to the committee before this meeting.
Excellent. Thank you. How about petitions? Have there been any petitions?
Thank you, Chair. No requests for petitions at this meeting.
Okay. We have no presentations. We have no items brought forward. Reports and discussion. We're on 9.1.1, guidelines for backyard and secondary suites presentation. So at this point, I'd like to ask Jill McLean, Principal Planner, Social Planning, and Brandon Approval, Planner 2, to give their presentation on the accessibility guidelines for backyard and secondary suites. Staff will be available after the presentation for questions from the committee. So you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you again, Chair, and good afternoon, Accessibility Advisory Committee. My name is Brandon Umperville, and I'm a planner on the social policy team in planning and development. I'm pleased to be here to have a conversation with all of you and present our proposed accessibility guidelines for secondary and backyard suites. In my presentation, I hope to outline the origin of this work, the approach we undertook to arrive at our recommendations, the proposed approach, and then give you an opportunity to provide any feedback you have or answer any questions you might have. I also have included some guiding questions at the end of the presentation, if that's useful. So in terms of origin, on September 1st, 2020, region-wide amendments to allow secondary and backyard suites accessory to single unit, 2-unit, or townhouse dwellings were approved. Since then, approximately 400 applications have been received for secondary and backyard suites, 137 for backyard suites, and 267 for secondary suites. On September 30th, 2020, a supplementary motion was passed. It's up on the screen, and I'll read it for you. It goes as follows: that Halifax Regional Council requests a staff report that 1, recommends approaches to ensure accessibility to secondary and backyard suites from streets or driveways, and 2, discusses how the municipality will monitor secondary and backyard suites to determine if further amendments to the community land use bylaws should be considered. The approach that we're presenting to you today, the proposal, is really a response to the first part of that motion. In the second part of that motion, I think it's worth noting that we expect the secondary and backyard suite program will need updating as we move along, like we're here to present to you today. And that could include keeping an eye on the success and limitations of the proposals we are presenting to you today for accessibility guidelines. So first, I'd like to mention that throughout our work, we take the view that accessibility for secondary backyard suites is an important consideration to ensure that all residents, including those with accessibility needs, can benefit from new housing permissions like secondary and backyard suites. The approach we took in this project was to get a better understanding of the building code requirements and how far they go to ensure accessibility. Then we undertook a jurisdictional scan of other Canadian municipalities who have recently or are in the process of adopting amendments to allow secondary and backyard suites. We also provide some analysis of the language we included in the original amendments back in September 2020. And finally, we outline our proposed backyard and secondary suite accessibility guidelines. So first, on the building code requirements, accessibility requirements in the code apply to residential buildings that have 4 or more units. And so a secondary or backyard suite accessory to a single unit, 2-unit, or townhouse dwelling would not pass that 4-unit threshold to trigger those requirements. So they're not included. But however, adaptability requirements were introduced to the Nova Scotia Building Code in 2019. These requirements ensure that a residential unit can be easily adapted for use by a person with mobility issues and applies to all residential units, including secondary and backyard suites. Some of the new adaptability requirements include considerations for minimum door and corridor widths, lower electrical switches and higher outlets, grab bars. And then in section 3.8.4.2, there's a requirement that the entrance door to a building shall be easily accessed and be capable of being made barrier-free from a sidewalk or parking area. In consultation with our building officials, our understanding is that this provision is not a measurable requirement, and it is open to interpretation. They could, for example, raise concerns if there was insufficient space between a dwelling and another structure. If someone were looking to install a code compliant ramp, they could raise concerns there. So, like I said, we reviewed 10 Canadian municipalities who've recently adopted or are in the process of adopting their own secondary and backyard suite programs. Most of the jurisdictions have a similar approach to the proposal we're outlining today, the proposal that exists in Halifax already. And this is to require unobstructed access from a secondary or backyard suite to the street. Most jurisdictions have also developed some guidelines that include further accessibility considerations. One of the things we saw that wasn't common in the other jurisdictions was a requirement within regulations for hard surface pathways, for example. And in a couple jurisdictions, but not commonly, we saw that there wasn't a requirement for unobstructed access in the bylaw, and instead it was included in those guideline documents. So like I said, we did an analysis of the existing language that was approved as part of the secondary and backyard suite project back in 2020. With those provisions, the following language was included. Where the main dwelling unit does not have a side yard on both sides, a backyard suite must have unobstructed access upon the same lot in which the backyard suite is located to a public street. Based on our research and into the building code and some of the precedents that we've found in other jurisdictions, staff are recommending moving forward with a comprehensive set of accessibility guidelines that will be distributed and included with secondary and backyard suite application information. It was attached to the memo distributed for this meeting. We recommend this approach as there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to all of the properties in HRM that could benefit from a backyard or secondary suite. In a municipality the size of HRM, there are many unique properties given our urban, suburban, and rural neighborhoods, as well as geographic considerations such as steep grade or large lots, for example. By including a set of guidelines, there's an opportunity for us to provide a robust set of guidelines that we couldn't necessarily require within a land use bylaw. Among the jurisdictions that we looked at, Halifax, if they were to adopt these guidelines, would have the most comprehensive set of guidelines of all those jurisdictions. So staff believe that given the comprehensiveness of these guidelines, in combination with the building code requirements and that existing language that was already included for unobstructed access from a secondary or backyard suite to the street, there is the greatest opportunity to provide different levels of accessibility based on the need and the context. The guidelines that we developed are based on the Canadian Standards Association B65118 Accessible Design for the Built Environment Standards, as well as the Rick Hansen Universal Design Recommendations. Like I said, based on these, it allows us to include a much more exhaustive list of accessibility considerations. Our plan would be to include these guidelines with permit application information and distribute them as widely as possible publicly. The guidelines are attached to the memo, and they include provisions for entrances and doors, ramps, parking, and passenger drop-off and pickup zones. I'm happy to look at them in a bit more detail through your questions if that's necessary. And finally, I've included a list of 3 questions for your consideration today. The first one is, do you have any feedback regarding the attached accessibility guidelines or the proposed approach as a whole? The second question, are there any strategies you would recommend we consider in distributing and sharing these guidelines? And the third question, do you have further comments or experience regarding secondary and backyard suites or housing issues and accessibility generally? Of course, those are just some guiding questions. I look forward to your feedback and any questions that you might have.
Hi there,
thank
this
you all
is
for your-
Liz. Sorry for interrupting. If you don't mind holding for 1 second, I'm just having difficulty with the interpreter switch. I can't find the interpreter. Just give me
Oh,
1
that's
second.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. It moved on my screen. Okay, sorry. I'm good now. Thank you. Thank you
No,
for your,
thank you. And so I know I was just wrapping up there. So would you like me to go back over these questions, or do I need to go back a little bit?
if you don't mind doing the 3 questions again, that'd be great. And Liz is saying, actually, I think there might have been 1 slide before the 3 questions, if you don't mind going back 1 slide.
No problem. So find my notes there. So the accessibility guidelines that were attached to the memo distributed today include provisions for entrances and doors, ramps, parking, as well as passenger drop-off and pickup zones. Finally, I've outlined 3 questions to guide some discussion today. The first question, do you have any feedback regarding the attached accessibility guidelines or the proposed approach as a whole? The second question, are there any strategies you would recommend we consider in distributing and sharing these guidelines? And the third question do you have further comments or experience regarding secondary and backyard suites or housing issues generally? Of course, these are just guiding questions, and I look forward to your feedback and any other questions you might have. Thank you all for your time and consideration today, and I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Brandon, for your presentation. Let's begin the question round. Jordan, do you have any feedback for Brandon?
I don't have much feedback. I think the guidelines are very well done. And I don't have any experience from those questions other than just how they might be implemented and widely distributed. I know that in to answer the third question, that accessible housing can be very hard to come by, and I applaud HRM for being able to look into this issue and try to implement it as part of the secondary and backyard suites plan. Thank you.
Okay, Brandon.
Thank you so much, Jordan, for your feedback. And yeah, we look forward to distributing these as widely as possible and ensuring that they're available and have some sort of impact on the secondary and backyard suite program to ensure that we can have the greatest accessibility possible. And like I said, if that's not the case with the implementation, then we can come back and further monitor this program and make adjustments.
Okay. Councillor Digo-Yemen, do you have any questions you'd like to?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Brandon, for the presentation and the advance. Having the being able to read it before the meeting today was very helpful too. Thanks. A quick one is just one that actually Jerry Post had in his correspondence, was around design for washrooms and where that might fit. The other is, I guess, maybe a little disappointed. It seems limited in terms of accessibility guidelines. Like, the scope seems a little bit limited to me, but maybe you can help me understand that a little bit more. And one of the things, especially around the backyard suites, I'm wondering around there's a requirement about what the square footage can be. And if there's a stairwell, and it's inside, it's considered part of the living space. And Jill, I see you nodding because you're probably remembering me talking about this. But especially whenever they're going to use a chairlift, then it's going to increase the size of the stairwell that you're going to need, because you want somebody to be able to use the chairlift, but maybe also have someone walk beside them. So that's even more space taken away from living space. So how will that be accommodated or looked at? So I guess between bylaw compliance and these guidelines, and if the guidelines somehow stand in the way of the bylaw, how are we going to address that issue?
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. So on the first piece about washrooms and where they might fit in, the guidelines that we developed were based on the Rick Hansen and the CSA standards. So I'll commit to taking a further look at those to see if there's more that we could include in terms of washrooms, and if not, I'll look to see where we could find some more of that information and include them in the guidelines.
Oh yeah, we
because
could be leaders.
Yeah, I think the guidelines are more easily adjusted as well than a bylaw would be. So I'll look into that. On the scope, sorry, I think I kind of mentioned that I would take a second look at the CSA standards and the Rick Hansen to see if we can expand it all in some areas. But I do that they were based on those, so maybe there are some more that I could add. But I'm open to hearing some suggestions. If you have other documents we could incorporate, I'd love to receive those from the committee.
Okay.
And then on the third one, the requirement, I think, yeah, Jill and I have both been in some meetings with you about this issue, and as part of the larger report. So this meeting today is specifically on the accessibility guidelines, but the larger report, we do look to deal with that issue. Our proposal at this time is to potentially exempt staircases and accessibility features from the gross floor area requirement, so that we could achieve that accessibility. Of course, it's a proposal right now, and the report is still in the draft stage, so we're still consulting on that. But maybe I can let Jill make a further comment if she'd like.
Yeah, no, I think you got that perfectly, Brandon. That we are looking to address that as part of the larger amendment package. There's a couple of housekeeping amendments in there as well, and then into the earlier bit regarding the guidelines as well. And Brandon can correct me if I'm wrong, but the guidelines did really focus on that kind of getting from the street to the entrance, and we're kind of our stayed outside of the structure of the inside of the building, just based on the direction of council, but that was built upon how we are limited as a land use bylaw writers as to what can happen within the building. That's not to say that we can't explore with our building officials about creating guidelines for the interior as well too. So that could be a supplemental project that happens after this as well.
And Mr. Chair, may I have a follow-up, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. So Jill, if that's a supplemental, is that something that we would, when the proposal comes back, that's when we would ask for a supplemental report to look at accessibility on the interior of backyard suites and secondary suites?
Through the chair or the clerk may be able to correct me on this, but I think this could be part of the recommendation from the advisory committee that they recommend to council that, staff further look at developing guidelines for an interior.
Great.
Guidelines.
So it can come from this committee.
Yes.
Perfect. And so then that's something, a motion we should try to figure out how to draft before the end of this meeting.
If you wanted to be part of this report that we're preparing to council, that could be something that could be looked at. It could happen either way. I mean, if you want to tie it to this particular report, that will be something that we'll need to do some work on, come back to this committee likely with those updates.
Right.
So it may cause a delay or may change the date as to when we'll get that other stuff to council. So that could be done through two separate reports as well. So if you wanted to continue with these guidelines for the exterior pathways from the street to the building, we can continue to counsel with that and then work on guidelines or work, and it may be a different group. It may be our building officials that are working on those guidelines as well too,
Right.
in the interior.
Okay, so maybe, Mr. Chair, this could be a follow-up business arising for our next meeting to have the committee talk more about the interior and see interior guidelines for the backyard secondary suites as opposed to holding up this report.
Sounds good. If we can do that, Amy?
Thank you, Chair. My apologies. That's for you to the committee member. So I just wanted to make sure that I understand the intent of the motion from the councillor. So would the intention to be to have this information come back to this committee specifically, or to have where the report hasn't yet gone to regional council, like of this iteration, my understanding is that it would be the committee making a recommendation to executive standing committee to then recommend that Halifax Regional Council request the supplemental report. So I'm doing two different things in my brain here, and happy to receive some clarification on intent and see where we get from there.
Yeah, well, my intention is not to hold up what is in front of us right now. But to build upon it in a supplementary report. But I'll, see what the rest of our esteemed committee members have to say. And maybe it will just be, like I said, an agenda item for our next meeting to have a more fuller discussion. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Brandon.
Yes. Liz, do you have any feedback for the presenters today?
So I find this concept interesting. I'm just trying to sort of put my lens on it as a deaf individual. So I'm not sure I really have anything to add at this point, where it be for like a deaf or maybe a blind individual, how to sort of make those things more accessible, having some way for them, some sort of tactile way of being able to find this suite from the roadway, maybe. I don't know what that would look like, whether it be a path of some sort of concrete or some sort of fencing or railing that they would follow along to, something along those lines. You'd want it to be something that's accessible, of course, something flat and smooth that people could move across easily, whether it's a mobility issue or a deaf-blind issue. I like the idea of the backyard suite as well. I've never thought of anything like that before. I think that's a great idea. I've known of suites before attached to buildings, but never to a backyard suite. So I think that's a great idea. And as well, if it was for, say, a deaf or blind individual, I'm curious if there'd be other rules that you could apply to this from, I'm not sure where you'd find those from, but that you could apply this to for this, if that makes sense. Right now, I feel like a lot of what we discuss about is sort of a mobility thing. So I'm wondering if there's some way we can get information from some location for a deaf individual or hard of hearing or a blind individual to sort of add more of a lens of that sort of a lens to it. Does that make sense? So not just a mobility lens, but those other sort of disability lenses, and where you'd find that information from.
Thank you, Chair, through you to the community member. I appreciate that feedback, and just taking a quick look at the guidelines to see if there's any mention of those types of features, being that they're based on the Rick-Hansen guidelines. Looking at in terms of ramps, one of the ones that I see includes color contrasted and slip resistant strips at landings, curbs or raised wall protecting ramp edges. So I think what I can commit to is looking further into them to ensure that we've included any features for blind or deaf individuals, and make sure that we haven't, excluded those mistakenly, and because I'm sure there are some consideration within the Rick Hansen and the CSA standards, or I hope there are. So we'll take a further look into that.
Great.
Okay. Nicole, do you have any feedback?
I don't have any feedback, but thank you for the presentation.
Okay. Jackie, do you have any comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I actually have a couple questions, if I may, please. I'm wondering where the number 4 came from. What was the deciding factor when we're talking about 4 as to where the standards start?
So thank you for the question through the chair to the committee member. The number 4 comes from the building code, which is provincial legislation and not something that and federal regulation, that not something that the municipality controls. Or so where 4 comes from, I don't know if Jill can speak better to that. I don't know where 4 came from, unfortunately.
Yeah, the only thing I can, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
My only assumption with the 4 is that's when a building becomes a multiple unit dwelling. So I think they wanted to tie it only to larger residential buildings or those with higher density. But yeah, that's just my assumption.
I would venture to say that it also includes that whole area of homes for special care. My background has been working with people with disabilities for many years, but through the Homes for Special Care Act and government. So that's where some of my questions are coming from. Second question through you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering how the municipality defines a secondary suite as opposed to a backyard suite.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair back to the committee member. A secondary suite is a suite that is included within the main dwelling, and a backyard suite is external to the main dwelling and separate dwelling unit.
Okay. And I guess that's how I saw that. Thank you. Third comment, I guess, and question through you, Mr. Chair. Again, my background has been working through the Homes for Special Care Act. And when I think of what we've had in the media over the last number of years with the Supreme Court and Human Rights Tribunal with regards to people living in large institutions, I think this is a wonderful alternative. However, in saying that, then we're talking many times relatives and family members that might be doing this with the provision of care or supervision. I'm wondering if in any of your research or consultation with others, if there's been any approach with the Department of Health and Wellness. Because when I think of my history and my background, we, with the Department of Community Services over the years, were instrumental, I think, in, for example, the provision of small option homes. They've been out there for many, many years. But there's been many issues of rub, really, between Department of Health and Community Services as to who provides care and is it care and is it not. So I'm just thinking it might be worthwhile that some consultation with that department, provincial department, be made, because it can make a difference for individuals and their future care. And if you have family members that are, willing to provide housing, that's one thing. But if they're not able to provide care, will health look at it as, another individual, or is that certainly part of that whole law? It's a brand new concept to them as well. So I'm just thinking it might be worthwhile ahead of the game, because we may be able to not have to go back and make adjustments. Because no matter what we do, and I've learned this in working in public service, no matter what you do, you have good intentions, and adjustments may be part of the plan, but they don't most often don't happen, or somebody is doing without when they do happen. So again, thank you for your time on this. Thank you for the presentation. It was wonderful. But they would be my comments and questions. Thank you.
And thank you, Jackie. I see Ms. Mahoney has arrived. Michelle, do you have anything? Or did you see the presentation or?
So I'm really sorry. I got called away. Brandon, I saw the last part of your presentation, and I'm so sorry I got called away. So but I'm just looking through it now, and I'm looking through I clicked on the September 20th and the original September 1st and September 30th, 2020. I'm just looking at those. Can we come back to me later, or can I potentially process this a little bit and get back to you? I'm so sorry.
Annie, can we continue with the meeting and then circle back to Michelle later? Does that work?
My apologies, Chair. I'm working with staff to figure out a potential motion here, so potentially not as attentive as I should be. My apologies. Depending on where we're at on the speaking list right now would dictate discussion ending. So if there are no other speakers on the list, or if there are no other members interested in speaking a second time, that is where we would stand. But it looks like there may be interest in members speaking a second time. So yeah, maybe I'll leave that to you, Chair, to go through the list again.
It was a good presentation, what I saw. I'm really sorry that I'll just say, I have no comments at this time.
Do I
That's
have any follow-up comments after Michelle, after you're finished? Do I have any second round comments?
Yes, Chair, it's Jordan here.
Okay.
I have some follow-up comments. I think just because I went first, it took me a little bit to process and read the guidelines,
Yeah.
or not the guidelines, but the questions. I am a neurodivergent individual. I have autism. And that again, I like the comments Liz made to follow up on that, because the neurodivergent and the deaf and blind, it's very intersectional in disability studies. It's not just about one disability or another. So I think Liz made some good points, and many of those same points would be applicable to neurodivergent individuals. And to echo Jackie and Councillor Daigle-Gammon's comments, there are a lot of questions that I would have, but I need to see more what the plans are kind of I'm a policy. Sometimes I like to get into the policy and look really hard for things, because I am a consultant with the public sector. So I would recommend for the second question in sharing and distributing is that, again, you make it as widely known as possible, and make it known to members of the disability community, because from what I found living in different municipalities and in HRM is that there is a lot of thoughts on what could be done. But again, it is a very individual adaptation kind of thing. For instance, my grandfather was a Second World War veteran, and he had a ramp put into his bungalow in a small town in Nova Scotia. And it also brings up ideas of we have a very demographic of an aging population that maybe a secondary street would help if someone could live in to help with things, or just to give a rental income. But again, as Jackie mentioned, it has a very interesting play in the intention and what actually happens. And I do have family that work in a similar public service and industry role to what she had experience in, and I hear that it can be very interesting to try to find out where things in those puzzles go. And I do applaud your department for trying to take that on. And I just say, like, look at it holistically, look at it as an integrated approach, and look at it intersectionally. That would be my feedback and that would be my feedback and my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can quickly just comment on Jordan's feedback there. No, I appreciate that. And now having heard from you and the other committee member of some other areas that we might want to look into, if you have resources that are, supplementary to the Ricanson guidelines that we used or the CSA standards, I'd appreciate receiving those to you. I think my contact information is on the memo that we distributed. So as well as resources for distribution to the community, we'd love to receive those. So thank you for that feedback, and it's well noted.
Well, thank you, Brandon, for your presentation. Thank you, Jill. Annie, are you available for the town hall discussion, or should we? Yes, are you available for that now?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. Unless there's any other action that the committee is looking for on this item in particular, and potentially might look to Councillor Degal-Gammon at this point.
Yeah, I think we should. Councillor Gammon, Degal-Gammon.
No, I think we don't want to hold up this report, or anything like that. So I think I'd reserve the request for a supplemental at this time. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I guess that's what you heard before, Annie.
Wonderful. My apologies, and thank you, members. So just for clarification, my apologies, Chair, we're now moving on to 9.1.2.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, wonderful, great. All right, thank you very much. Sorry, I was just exercising a different part of my brain for a little bit, but I am back in it now and excited to talk about how things have been working for the town hall. So wanted to once again just reiterate gratitude to the committee for having provided really explicit direction on what folks are looking for this year at the October 4th special meeting, and that has very much informed the way that myself and Melissa, the accessibility advisor, have been, moving forward in continuing to help plan this event with the committee. So there will be a couple of pieces that I'll speak to throughout this memo and just kind of provide an overview. And Melissa will also be speaking to a couple of pieces as well. So at the beginning of the memo here, I just say, based on the direction that was provided to staff during the October 4th special meeting, we have kind of gone ahead with, kind of largely replicating the event from 2021 with a couple of different caveats that the committee had kind of outlined. And I can kind of dig into those a little bit later into this discussion. But the event date, so at the July 18th meeting, members provided staff with a few different options for meeting dates. And based on the meeting dates of November 9th, 16th, and 17th, staff then contacted the library to ask what days would be available. November 16th and 17th were held. And with the caveat that that staff would follow up with the library on the final date once the live streaming vendor or facilitator was chosen. So the accessibility advisor then undertook a new procurement process to specify that we were looking for a live streaming vendor rather than a facilitator. And that was put out to tender. And then, well, I guess not actually tender because it's under a certain amount, so different process, but it was put out to a couple of different companies. We received a couple of quotes back, and Atlantic Livestream was chosen as the vendor for this year. So based on Atlantic Livestream's availability, the date that has been confirmed for the town hall is November 17th from 6:30 to 8:30. So following this meeting, I will put this as a hold in everybody's calendars so that we're all working towards the same date. But in terms of, the things that Atlantic Livestream will be responsible for will be the creation of the Zoom webinar and registration links so that members of the public can participate virtually. And for members who weren't on the committee last year, basically what happens is the core meeting is happening in Paul O'Regan Hall and is being live streamed through Zoom to YouTube, much like we're doing now. And members the public who are participating virtually are able to submit questions through in Zoom, have of Paul O'Regan Hall, and have that answer live streamed to everybody. The live streaming You're responsible for all of the backend. I'm organizing with cart captioning, which occurred last year as well, and they will be taking care of audio and camera operations. So the same as last year, there will be a camera on the front of the room where the panelists or committee members, depending on how this conversation goes today, may be sitting, and one camera that's specifically for the folks who are going to be providing ASL interpretation, so that is also simultaneously live streamed. Yeah, so I think I'll hand it over to Melissa for kind of an overview on the communication section of the memo.
Good afternoon, everyone. So in terms of a communication update, we've been working quite well with corporate communications. So in discussing with them and the staff, we decided to repurpose the material and update any material that we used last year in regards to the town hall meeting, just because of the limited constraint that we have. We received a communication plan from them on October 19th. They will be working on digital and print materials that can be given to HRM plus the Halifax Public Library. They'll be creating social media platforms, so utilizing similar messaging as what we did last year. Annie and myself are currently working on updating the halifax.ca page, so that we are on that page. We talked about the town hall meeting, how you can attend. That's where hopefully the link will be there at a later date. We do talk about transportation on that page, how people can get to the Halifax Public Library if they like to come in person. Communications is also working on email templates that we will be able to send out to people to help promote the event. And the internal communication about the town hall for HRM staff and counselors will also be circulated. And HRM will do a public service announcement regarding the town hall. And in regards to the halifax.ca page, we're hoping to get most of that up-to-date information by this Friday, October 28th. Back to you, Annie.
Thank you, Melissa. So next on the memo was the agenda. So based on the feedback received by the committee at the October 4th meeting, again, we were largely just trying to replicate the meeting from last year with the two kind of caveats that the committee had provided, that, you know, there's an interest in having folks there who would be able to speak more broadly to all of the, you know, like issues, projects, policies that are happening within specific business units. And also for, for there to kind of be an opportunity for a visioning session of sorts, like with the public about what the future town hall like could look like, how folks should be engaged, like all of that kind of stuff. So Melissa, I'll turn it back over to you for the panelist invites piece.
Yeah, thank you so much. It felt like Amy said, based on the direction that we got from you folks on the last meeting, it was clear that you wanted representatives from business units in terms of giving them an opportunity to provide any updates that they've been doing in relation to accessibility. Also, you indicated that within the town hall, you want ample time for the public to have a say in what they would like the future of the town hall to look like. So that is great. And so with that said, I had reached out last week to a few business units that we've used last year that we felt would be great to bring back this year. So we reached out to corporate and customer service. So Dion Young, who's on this committee, he will be a panelist. I too will be one of the panelists. I'll talk about diversity and inclusion and what we've been doing. I've reached out to Halifax Transit. We've reached out to Parks and Rec and Public Works. So we've given them a date of October 28th. So again, this Friday, everything seems to be this Friday for a deadline. So we're hoping to hear back from those business units in terms of if they can provide a representative to attend the town hall. Thanks, Amy.
Wonderful. And so then the other piece of you know, the kind of changes that were made to the agenda were the creation of that, you know, added kind of dynamic around like really facilitating some feedback and conversation with the public participants about the future of the town hall, you know, like how would folks want to be engaged? What are, you know, the biggest accessibility like challenges facing the municipality in the next year, so that there's a balance both of, you know, business units having the ability to provide an update on what is being worked on, for folks to ask clarification questions about those pieces, and then also for folks to share, you know, a bit more about where they would like to see the committee's work, you know, like be guided or informed in the future. So in attachment A of the memo that was circulated last week is the draft agenda, which includes the proposed section around, you know, the public kind of like open floor, like visioning session. And I think that like logistically, it would likely make sense for this to kind of follow the same sort of format that the Q&A might, just so that folks who are participating virtually and folks who are participating on the floor all have the opportunity to provide their input or provide feedback. But with the suggestion that this might be a great opportunity for members of the committee to actually be up at the front of the room at that point in time, so that members of the public are aware of, you know, who is on the committee, who's, you know, like doing the work around the town hall in the future. So to kind of provide that distinction between HRM staff and then and then like members of the committee. So that's just a suggestion, like for consideration, and we can certainly, you know, bake that into the event itself. You know, potentially there's a quick break in between the open floor session for Q&A and then the visioning session, so that staff, you know, might be able to move into some of the roles that committee members might be holding on, and members of the committee are able to be up at the front of the room. And then the two kind of like pieces that we're also really looking for some feedback on from the committee tonight, and also just some kind of, you know, some buy-in so that it can help staff plan as well for support the day of, would be for the roles that committee members are willing to take on at the event itself. So, you know, it would be expected that folks who are taking on roles are in person at Paulo Regan Hall, and as many members of the committee as possible to be at Paulo Regan Hall as well. Last year, this required a lot of staff support to make happen, and where this is the committee's event and this is the committee's, you know, kind of opportunity to own this event as well. I think having representation there is going to make it really, really successful. So we are certainly looking for members today during the discussion on this item to say which, you know, which roles they'd be interested in taking on, and then perhaps members like saying one or two different roles. I will note that, you know, for roles such as like mic runners or for sighted guides, this might, well, especially for sighted guides too, it might be potentially better suited for folks who are potentially not in wheelchairs, and then that way nobody is you know, being put into a situation where, you know, they have to be more you know, like mobile throughout the meeting, but there's certainly roles for every single member of the committee to take on at the event this year. So we'll be looking for members to please sign up for those roles. And one piece as well that is tied to this that I've just confirmed during email today, but I think is important to share with the committee, is that because of the, you know, provincial kind of like oversight around COVID regulations, that the municipality nor like Halifax Public Library locations are able to enforce mask wearing. However, the same as it happens like in like at City Hall, for instance, there are signs that say masking is strongly encouraged, and that is, I've spoken with the library today, and that is something that can absolutely be you know, added into communication materials, setting that standard before the event actually happens. And between, you know, Melissa and myself are happy to provide masks at the door to members of the public and those who would like to join in person as well. So want to make sure that, you know, safety is of course a top priority always, but particularly, you know, we all recognize that we're not out of a global pandemic. So just wanted to ensure members that was taken into consideration. Those conversations are being had, and want this to be a space that everyone feels safe in for sure. And then for the last piece, I'll hand that over to Melissa, and then we can open the floor.
Thank you, Annie. So the last piece is in relation to special meetings. So the next accessibility advisory committee is scheduled for November 21st. However, in the past, because the town hall meeting is in November, we normally cancel the November committee meeting. Given the condensed timeline for planning this year, we're proposing that a special meeting takes place prior to November 17th, which is the town hall. So we have two options for you folks. We have either Monday, November 7th from 4 to 6, or we have Monday, November 14th from 4 to 6. So any of not sure if we should get them to vote on this now, or how do we want to proceed with this?
Thank you. And to the committee, I think as long as there is, as long as everybody is able to share what their availability would be, either for November 7th or 14th, there also are a couple of members who aren't able to be here today that I want to check in with and make sure that we'll have quorum for either of those. So basically, when providing like comments or your feedback today, folks could please make sure to state the role or roles that you'd be interested in, potentially like maybe listing like a couple of roles, and also what your availability would be for a special meeting. And then I will touch base with the committee members who weren't able to be present tonight to make sure that there is at the very least a majority of members who are able to attend that special meeting.
Okay, I would draw your attention, Annie. Jackie has commented on something she would be willing to do. Okay,
Wonderful, thank you.
excellent. All right, so let's begin our feedback round. Councilor Diego Gammon, do you have any input for Annie and Melissa?
Yeah, just a few quick questions. Just around the presentation, like who's going to be on the panel from Halifax Transit, probably Accessibus, but I'm just wondering if there was a way to add in someone from the new accessible taxi, because that could be something that people would be really interested in, like how they find out more about it, and all of those kind of things would be great. And I'll do any job that you need me for. On the 17th, I'll be there. You could give me the job that nobody else wants. How's that?
You appeal to the counselor. So what I did was I reached out to a high level within each business unit. So hopefully who comes to speak for transit will also come to speak in terms of the extra taxi service. So we're looking for business units to give an overall view of what they've done as a unit as a whole this year instead of focusing specifically on one.
Okay. Okay, good. And the last comment is just I can't. I have the commitment on the 7th, so November 7th, I wouldn't be able to attend a special meeting. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Liz, do you have any feedback from the discussion?
So I can do the 7th or the 14th. I'm good for both. For responsibility wise, or I don't really know what there is that I could, like, what are the options of things that I could be helping with. But I'm happy to help with whatever anyone needs. Also, I think just as general feedback, it'd be nice if the panelists don't sort of long talk for extended periods of time, so that the audience does have a chance to talk. And also, it's nice to hear from the different representatives as well. We don't want one representative to sort of take over the panel and talk excessively. So it'd be nice if there's sort of the ability to have a diverse panel and have everyone sort of have a chance to speak, but not for so long that the audience doesn't have a chance to participate as well. Actually, I have one more thing if I could add as well.
Yep, sure.
I was gonna say, I believed it was last year, but I think it might have been 2019. The last time that we were in person in Dartmouth. Was that 2019? And I don't even remember the where we were at that point. I think maybe at the Sportsplex in 2019. I believe that's where the town hall was. Am I correct in that information? Does anyone know?
I believe it was Cole Harbor Place, and I'm not sure of the date.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's right. That's right. I knew it was in Dartmouth, but I couldn't remember the exact location, but that's right. It was in Cole Harbor Place. So for that town hall, I felt like the people who were speaking for extended periods of time. And as a committee member, I really wanted to hear what people thought about the panel, about the individuals speaking. So I think to have time for that would be helpful.
Through you, Chair, to the member, absolutely, and that is something that we wanted to make sure is communicated on the front end as well. So, for potential presentations or overviews from business units, 5 minutes is certainly the sweet spot, between 5 to 10 minutes. And last year at the event, we did, for questions that were coming from the floor, kind of 3-minute increments for each question, so that folks would have the opportunity to, ask their questions, to hear concerns be brought from the floor, and for members to provide answers to everyone. But that 3-minute mark was kind of the attempt at that balance there, to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to speak.
That's all for me.
All right, thank you, Liz. Nicole, do you have any comments?
In regards to the meeting, I am free both on the, what was it, the 7th or the 14th? Are those the dates to choose from? Yeah, so I'm free both of those days so far, I think. And yeah, for the town hall, I don't know if there's any jobs that I could help out with. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jackie, do you have any input, discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the 2 dates, I'm available both days, so whatever best for most other folks. Also, besides what my offer was as a role, I can also do cited guide. And just to share, Mr. Chair, through you with the rest of the members, is CNIB does have a small video that gives you a bit of practical kinds of training around being a cited guide. So if folks are interested, they could go and look at that. And that would be it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jackie.
Thank you,
Jordan.
Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair, and through you to the member and to really the rest of the committee as well. For folks who are interested in either learning more or potentially taking on a role as a cited guide, I will absolutely distribute those materials as well. We have them on hand from last year. Just make sure that members have access to that far in advance. Yeah.
Okay. Jordan, do you have any comments and discussion?
I think it looks like so far it's planned well, and I think it's going to be a great event. I can be there in person. I actually have it marked off in my calendar. It's the most important thing that month. So I will be there in person, and I can do any role. I'm not as confident as being a sighted guide, just with the autism and some of the interpersonal and tactile things. I'd love to learn how to be one, but that would be more of my learning style is visual and watching someone and reading the materials and seeing if I can do it. But otherwise, I can do any of the roles. And the 7th and the 14th both do work for me. The 14th is a bit more free, but I can make it work on the 7th as well if needed by the committee. Thank you.
Okay. I'll jump in here and say that I am available both the 7th and the 14th, Annie, so you can factor that in however you need. And finally, Michelle, do you have any comments or discussion?
Well, I am scheduled to have a hip replacement on November 7th, so I guess I'm gonna have to decline all. I will do every attempt to log on and be present at the event. You know, unless I'm up doing cartwheels and la la la's on, you know, days after, then I'll be there in person. But so I'm gonna have to decline all.
Best of luck with your surgery there,
Thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate that.
Charlie. All right, Annie, so does that conclude our discussion on that?
Mr. Chair, I think we do have one more question from our Vice Chair.
Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to take a moment and give a big thank you, and I think I'm speaking on behalf of the other board members, to you, Annie, and to you, Melissa, and for some of your colleagues as well. I know you've worked hard on this. It was short turnaround time. We were kind of up in the air as a board in terms of when and where and if we're going to do it. So thank you. Thank you for all your work around the town hall. I know we're here, but like I said before, you're the folks that do the legwork and you make this happen. So thank you.
Yes, I would echo those comments. Definitely, definitely a good help for us. Thank you so much. Okay, committee members, do we have any? I do not think so. Returning to the agenda. We don't, and nor do we have any staff updates. Those two still correct, Annie?
Thank you, Chair. That is correct.
Okay, no added items. So now we are on to the date of our next meeting, which Annie will follow up with us on that. Later on this week, we will she'll nail that down for us, and we will gather on that date. So I'd like to call for a motion to adjourn, please.
This is Liz, I move.
Thank you, Liz. So our meeting is adjourned at 5:17 p.m. Thank you, everyone. And
Thank
we
you.
will,
Thank you,
see
everyone.
on